Chapter 893, The King, Marching. Chapter 893, The King, Marching. As marching passed, everyone gave way. Only a few could stand up to the pressure he exuded. Even the elites of the academy nodded in approval. This young man strode boldly forward. He had the appearance of a king. In the immortal realm, the so-called kings were not those human cultivators that had formed chi, but those formidable characters that possessed outstanding presence. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone be able to become a king, and cause the word king to become much too cheap? Yet this marching completely deserved the name of king. Without battling, his presence was enough to subdue enemy troops. His was really a figure that would be rare even in 100,000 years. I never thought that our institution actually managed to receive this kind of student. Ever since Hai Feng left the Northern Institution, we have never had this kind of king-tier student anymore. There has been a lapse of over 1,000 years. On the other hand, the Eastern, Southern, and Western institutions, respectively, have received a king-tier student in these few hundred years, and have left us far behind. Even if this kid can't pass through the White Star Tower's test, I will still take him as my personal disciple. Ho ho! How could a king-tier student possibly be unable to pass through the first 3 levels of assessments? Old Zhu, you are bearing malicious intentions, wanting to snatch this king-tier student for yourself. Fuck, am I that kind of person? You obviously are. When the exchange between these elites was heard by the people nearby and the news was spread out, a stir was created in the crowd. A king-tier student. This was too shocking. Even with how big the territory of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire was, this kind of talent would probably appear only once every 100 years. It was extremely rare, and comparable to a 3-star genius. Marching entered into the 9-storied tower. Very quickly, the 3rd level lit up. There were very many people who could pass through the first 2 levels, and it had practically ensured that the first 2 levels were constantly lit, but the 3rd level was a different story. It would only flicker occasionally. But after only a while, the 4th level lit up as well. Would he be able to reach the 5th level? Everyone felt curious. The aura of a king was not among the assessment criteria of the White Star Tower, so it could not possibly gain him extra credit. Thus, whether or not you were a king had absolutely no effect on the question of whether you could pass through the White Star Tower. If Ma Xing could pass through the 5th level with his own individual ability, then added with his king's chi, he would be able to reach the battle prowess of a 2-star genius, and in the future, he might even still have room for improvement and reach the level of a 3-star, or even 4-star genius. Do you all know that the left and right ministers as well as the 7 generals of our empire all possess king's chi, and they themselves are 4-star geniuses? What? Everyone was astonished by this explosive revelation, and grabbed their heads, exclaiming their shock. What, is it real? Then wouldn't that be comparable to 5-star geniuses? A super existence that only exists in legends. Naturally. Do you know how many millennia those elites have cultivated for? Your clan's ancestor hadn't even been born, and these few have already began cultivating. Apparently, the youngest, Lord Left Minister, is already 80 million years old this year. 80? Over 80 million years old? Are you sure you did not speak wrongly? It is not 80,000 years, or 800,000 years old. Of course, in the past, which among the left and right ministers and the 7 generals was not a forceful ruler of a region? It was only when Her Majesty, the Empress, appeared out of nowhere and swept aside all opposition in the world with her invincibility that the lords were all gathered under her banner. Say, how many star genius is Her Majesty, the Empress, then? I don't know. There has never been anyone who has seen Her Majesty move, because there is absolutely no need for that. That's right. Her Majesty is the greatest beauty in the world. Who would be so cruel to make a move on her the moment they saw her? Sure, don't speak rashly, or you may lose your head at any moment. To dare to disrespect the Empress, are you tired of living? I was just complimenting Her Majesty. Just at this moment, the 5th level of the White Star Tower lit up. All of a sudden, a stir was created among the crowd. The 5th level meant that he had the potential of a 1-star genius, and added with his solid king's might, Ma Xing was practically sure to become a 2-star genius in future. Ha 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 ha. The elites of the Northern Institution were all laughing very delightedly, feeling that they had finally gotten a hold of a treasure this time round. This was a definite piece of excellent jade, and with careful carving, it was possible for him to even become a 3-star or 4-star genius. Meanwhile, Luo Ba's expression darkened. Even if Ma Xing failed immediately, the concentrated attention that the other would receive in the academy would definitely exceed his. This made him feel as if he had been slapped. In another corner, an old man said, "Haofei, you've encountered a rival." Cheng Haofei stared at the 9-storied tower, and said, "Great-grandfather, I have the confidence to pass through the 6th level. If you can become a 2-star genius, then you would not be weaker than him." The old man's attention focused. "Do you have the confidence?" "Full confidence." Cheng Haofei gripped his fists. He had worked hard at cultivation for more than 10 years. Wasn't it all for him to amaze everyone with a single feat on this day and shock everyone? On another side, Li Weiwei was also looking very astonished. She then tossed a disdainful glance at Ling Han as she said, "Blockhead, now do you still dare to be confident?" "Why would I not dare?" Ling Han asked, smiling. "He is a 1-star genius, and has King's Chi as well, so he would at least become a 2-star genius." Li Weiwei looked at him as if she was staring at an idiot. Yet Ling Han crossed his arms behind his back, and said, "I have said so before. I am invincible, and it applies to everyone." Ayaya, how could this guy be so puffed up? He was obviously a country bumpkin that had just come from a small world, so why was his confidence level so sky-high? Li Weiwei felt as if she was about to be driven mad, but looking at how self-confident Ling Han looked, she could not help but become a bit absent-minded. She had to admit that when men showed off this kind of invincible presence, it was still extremely attractive for women. Pay. I was not moved in the slightest. He is nothing but an idiot. Li Weiwei quickly spat, and threw that little bit of fluster that had just arisen out of her thoughts. Just at this moment, gasps of shock rang out. The 6th level, lit up as well. Heavens! He himself is a 2-star genius, and added with his King's Chi, Ma Xing is comparable to a 3-star genius. He is definitely the most outstanding student in the last 100 years. No. There are not that few 2-star geniuses, but added with his King's Chi and limited to the Northern Institution, it would be difficult to meet one such as he in 1,000 years. Everyone exploded from surprise. They had witnessed the birth of a king. Luo Ba's fists cracked from clenching them too tightly. Ma Xing's strength and talent caused endless killing intent to arise with him. If he killed the other, then he would still be the first place. Cheng Haofei similarly felt as if he had been dealt a heavy blow. He had been confident he could pass through the 6th level of the White Star Tower, but that would only be the same as the other party. If one added in King's Chi, he was far too inferior. Thankfully, Ma Xing did not continue to shock others, and very quickly came out of the tower. He had failed on the 2nd stage of the 7th level. This result once again caused a stir. The elites of the Northern Institution had practically confirmed that Ma Xing was going to hold the first place in the assessment this time, and fought to extend an olive branch to him, wanting to take him in as their personal disciple. Ma Xing did not accept, appearing to be extremely proud and aloof, yet this made the elites even more pleased with him. What future elite would not be arrogant and obstinate in nature? Without a little temper, would you have the nerve to call yourself an elite? Should be about time. I should go in as well, Ling Han said. Chapter 894, Entering the Tower. Chapter 894, Entering the Tower. After Ma Xing came out, those that had not yet undergone the assessment became gradually fewer and fewer. Those that did not pass were directly sent out of the academy, and those that had passed stood on another side of the square. Together, there were only over 300 of them, and compared to the number that had come to register for the enrollment, this number was pitifully small. There were about 1,000 people that had yet to take the assessment, and standing in the massive square, they seemed odd. Li Weiwei's status was special, which was why she managed to come back after taking the assessment. She heard Ling Han was about to take the assessment, and could not help but become excited. She said, go on, I can no longer wait to humiliate you. You will not have that opportunity." Ling Han smiled, appearing to be very confident. "TSK. Li Weiwei scoffed. This guy had just ascended from a small world, so he could not have come into contact with the White Star Tower before, and thus absolutely would not know what the assessment inside the tower was like. Where had he gotten such overwhelming confidence from? Big Sister Yoon. Her eyes were sharp, and she spotted a young woman that had just arrived in the square. She immediately raced over. This woman was dressed in a long snow-white skirt, and aside from a hairpin, there was no other adornment on her. This gave her a kind of natural beauty, unearthly and elegant, like a fairy that was above the common populace. Wearing any additional ornaments was unnecessary, and would only damage her quiet and exquisite presence. She was Ji Yuna, one of the 3 great beauties of the imperial capital, and was also one of the 3 great elites of the younger generation. She had enough admirers to line up around the colossal imperial capital 3 times. Although she did not have as strong a background as Li Weiwei's, her suitors definitely were not few. Ji Yuna nodded, and asked, "Weiwei, have you passed the assessment?" Li Weiwei nodded. "Big Sister Yoon, why are you so late? I thought you had changed your mind and planned to wait another 5 years to take the assessment for the Eastern institution." Ji Yuna's slender brows wrinkled unwittingly, but they immediately smoothened out, and she said, "I already agreed to take the assessment with you, so how could I possibly break my word? All right, let's not talk now. I'm going to take the assessment." "Okay." Li Weiwei suddenly waved her hand, and declared loudly, "Big Sister Yoon, go on, you definitely have to beat that show-off of a blockhead." Ji Yuna naturally did not know who this blockhead was. She walked elegantly and naturally towards the White Star Tower as if she was a cloud, unmarred by dirt, touching and graceful, causing many who saw her to turn heated gazes on her. Ma Xing's eyes lit up as well, and he revealed an interested expression. The corners of his mouth lifted up slightly, with a slight demonic feel to it. In the corner, Cheng Haofei was also walking towards the White Star Tower. It was about time. If he still did not move, then that was not showing off anymore, rather, he would miss the assessment this time entirely. This was the last batch, and at the same time, also the highest quality batch. The 3rd level lit up repeatedly, and even the 4th level would light up every now and then, abruptly increasing the number of those who had passed the assessment by another 100 and more. However, the 5th level adamantly did not light up. Ling Han walked into the tower, and everyone beside him immediately disappeared. He no longer heard any background noise, either. He had entered into an independent space. Ahead of him, a stone chamber suddenly appeared. There was only a simple stone table, and a jade plaque lay on the table. The 1st level, the 1st stage, a test of comprehension. A voice rang out, so cold that there was not a hint of emotion in it. The tool spirit of the White Star Tower. A god tool was a god tool, after all. Aside from small tower, Ling Han had never heard another tool spirit speak. "Che, the lowest grade god tool, not even fit to pick up my shoes," small tower declared in a very tsunda manner. Ling Han paid it no attention, and asked, "How will we be tested?" "There is a section of a cultivation technique etched on that jade plaque. You have to decode it in 30 minutes time to pass the test, and the shorter the time you take, the better your result," the tool spirit answered coldly. In this god tool, it could split itself into millions, and it would be easy for it to communicate with over 10,000 people at the same time. Ling Han could not help his curiosity, and questioned, "Is there a record to be broken? And will there be any reward for breaking the record?" "There is a record to be broken, but there is no reward. Your name will only be etched here," the tool spirit replied. "There are 10 names etched on the wall in front of you, and they are the 10 people who have taken the shortest amount of time. If someone afterward surpasses their record, a name will be replaced." Ling Han shook his head, then there was no point to break the record. "You may begin," the tool spirit said calmly. If this had been an immortal level elite, he would have long lost patience with Ling Han's incessant questions and want to beat someone up, but it merely followed a predefined pattern, and did not experience the slightest rise or fall of emotion. Only now did Ling Han walk towards the stone table and sit on the ground. He picked up the jade plaque, and inserted his divine sense within. Instantly, multiple ancient letters popped out and churned around in his mind's eye. This kind of inherited cultivation technique would enter directly into the mind, and could not be described in written word or spoken speech. Only when one really comprehended it would he be able to give a rough description of it. Take note, it was only a rough description, and not the cultivation technique itself. A cultivation technique was a serious business, and there was no room for the slightest error. Ling Han closed his eyes slightly, and placed the jade plaque down as he said, "This is a claw technique, but it is badly damaged. There are only 2.5 moves left, and there isn't a complete set of route map for the movement of origin power, either. With regards to moves, it should be like this." He gestured a few times, showing off the 2.5 moves of the claw technique. Because it did not involve any use of origin power, it was naturally without difficulty. The tool spirit paused, then said, "Though this martial arts technique is very low grade, your comprehension level is very high. You may be ranked in the 13th place, but cannot leave your name." Ahem. At first, Ling Han was completely uninterested in breaking the record, but when he heard that his speed could only rank 13th, he could not help but feel a competitive spirit rising up in him. He could use this place to compare himself with his predecessors. The Scarlet Heaven Academy had been established for millions of years. How many elite geniuses had once appeared here? Many of them were currently the pillars of support for the Empire. "You may proceed to the second stage," the tool spirit said. The wall ahead suddenly vanished, revealing a corridor. Ling Han walked over, and saw that at the end of the corridor, there was another stone chamber. Similarly, it only had a stone table, with a jade plaque laid on it. Did he have to take the test again? You have a maximum of 3 chances to use your spiritual energy to shatter this jade plaque. The tool spirit's voice rang out again. This time, it was a test of spiritual strength and tenacity. If the spirit was not strong enough, it would be equivalent to the punches one delivered lacking weight, and without enough tenacity, it was as if one's fists were made out of tofu. No matter how much strength there was, one would still be shattered by his own blows. From the shattering void tier, cultivators would begin to cultivate their spirits. This was in preparation for advancing into the immortal level. Li Weiwei and the others had been nurturing their spirits with various treasures since childhood, so their spirits were naturally incredibly strong and resilient. This was also the reason why Li Weiwei was not optimistic about Ling Han. They had much too vast a gap between their starting lines. Perhaps Ling Han could pass through the first 3 levels, but it would be as difficult as touching the skies for him to be able to attain a good result. What degree of power the wealth of the various great forces reached was something primarily exhibited in this area. For example, the reason why Li Weiwei failed on the 5th level was not because her spirit was not strong enough, nor was her talent inadequate, but rather the fact that she had much too little combat experience. Ling Han smiled slightly. How could his spirit lose to these members of the younger generation of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire? Chapter 895, Maximum Strength of the Shattering Void Tier. Chapter 895, Maximum Strength of the Shattering Void Tier. Ling Han looked at the jade plaque, and with a thought, a stream of spiritual energy surged out, heading towards the jade plaque. This was strength of the spirit. When the spirit was strong to a certain extent, a mere thought would be able to move the regulations of the heavens and earth, and shatter even a colossal planet. Of course, this was something that could only be done by an ultimate elite of the Genesis tier, and Ling Han was still who knew how far away from that step. The jade plaque immediately shattered into pieces. Ling Han smiled slightly. He was still very far away from being able to destroy a planet with a single thought, but how difficult would it be to shatter a jade plaque? Furthermore, he merely delivered a careless trike, and had not used Sword Heart. Otherwise, his spiritual energy would be even more frightening. This was because he had drunk the reincarnation tea. Even if it was just a single sip, his present spiritual strength would definitely not be weaker than any other shattering void tier cultivators in this world. I have not yet said what range of distance you have to be in to make your move, the tool spirit suddenly said. Ling Han gave an ah, and said, "Is it too near? Then just place another jade plaque." "No, you have passed," the tool spirit said. "According to the rolls, you can be as close as 3 feet away to blast out your spiritual energy." Ling Han could not help but shed cold sweat. Why did he feel that this tool spirit carried a bit of the feeling that small tower gave off as well? It actually had a cold sense of humor as well. "Pay, how could it compare to me?" Small Tower meanwhile was acting Tsunder again. It disliked other tower-shaped spirit tools the most. You can advance to the third stage, the tool spirit said. The wall once again disappeared, and yet another corridor appeared. Ling Han walked along the corridor to the end, and saw that there was yet another stone chamber ahead of him. However, in comparison to the previous 2 chambers, this one was 100 times bigger. Rather than calling it a stone chamber, it would be more appropriate to call it an arena. Block 10 moves from him, and you can pass, the tool spirit said. Starlight flickered and condensed into a human figure. This was a human figure made out of spots of light, and one could vaguely distinguish that it was the image of a man. He had a tall, slender figure, but his exact features could not be clearly seen. Young man, make your move, the starlit man said, his voice clear and loud, possessing a kind of forcefulness that could cause others to yield. Ling Han could not help but be surprised, and said, "Why is this so similar to a real person? Not just the appearance, but also those reflexes and that presence. In the first place, it was formed from the spiritual mark that an elite left behind," the tool spirit said. Throughout history, out of all participants, only the person with the strongest battle prowess would be able to leave his spiritual mark behind, becoming an assessment for those who come afterward. Ling Han was even more curious now, and asked, "Then this is?" Shu Ran of a certain clan, the starlit human figure said. Shu Ran, he entered into the academy 300,000 years ago, and has been known as the greatest genius in history. He left 300 years later, charging out into the world alone, and no further news was heard of him, the tool spirit said. In this million years, no other person surpassed him. Ling Han was shocked. He was a monster. The tool spirit made its evaluation. In the same cultivation level, others could only approach his height, yet were unable to stand as his equal. What more surpass him? The test you are undergoing is only on the level of the Shattering Void tier, and he is also the keeper of the record on the Mountain River tier. This treasured spirit tool could actually start up another assessment on the level of the Mountain River tier. Ling Han's eyes could not help but blaze with fierce fighting spirit. Pointing at Shu Ran's starlight body, he asked, "What if I can defeat him?" "Then you would have automatically passed the third stage on the remaining 8 levels, the tool spirit replied. What kind of strength did Ling Han presently possess? 16 stars of Shattering Void tier. If one took on this shot from him head-on, what Shattering Void tier cultivator would be unscathed? Unless his physique could also reach the level of Ling Han's physique. The tool spirit could not help but be stunned. Ling Han's physique and battle prowess both caused its eyes to light up. One had to know that this human had yet to reach the maximum strength of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. Ling Han did not pull his punches at all. Shio, shio, shio. Another 3 arrows consecutively shot out. Then, wielding his sword, he charged out. His right hand used the 10,000 techniques return to 1, whereas his left hand circulated the earth overturning seal, blasting out at Shu Ran. Peng, peng, peng. The two were embroiled in a fierce battle. Endless waves of power spread out like waves in a sea. Ling Han used his battle prowess to the fullest. The other's strength was superior to his, so he was naturally not going to go head-to-head with him by force. Instead, he displayed his own battle prowess to its fullest, especially the annihilating Dragonstar arrow. He combined with it the 2 mystical powers of Thunderclap Ninth Heaven and the Eye of Truth, and the battle prowess it could exhibit was the most terrifying. But, disappointingly, Shu Ran did not have any weakness at all over his entire body. He was not a real living being, but rather branded by the tool spirit making use of the essence Shu Ran had left behind, so it naturally did not possess the weaknesses of an actual living being. However, while it did not have weaknesses, it could still be claimed that its whole body was covered with weaknesses. Ling Han shot out arrows madly, every shot frightening. Once he had closed the distance between himself and Shu Ran, he abandoned the bow, and used the sword. As the 10,000 techniques returned to 1 slashed out, exploding with an ultimate strike, it would be able to force even an elite the likes of Shu Ran to retreat. The battle was at a stalemate. Chapter 896, 6th Level Genius. Chapter 896, 6th level genius. If it were any other person, even if their strength was 16 stars of shattering void tier, they also wouldn't be able to fight Shu Ran head-on. However, Ling Han was different. His strongest edge wasn't battle prowess, but the ultimate defense brought about by the indestructible Heaven Scroll. This was the most terrifying part by nature. He was already invincible. 10 moves, 20 moves, 50 moves, 100 moves, they had long exceeded the upper limit of moves with the strongest battle prowess of the 9th level of White Star Tower, but the victor was still yet to be determined. Admittedly, Ling Han was being thoroughly thrashed by Shu Ran, but under the effects of annihilating Dragon Star Arrow, Shu Ran wasn't doing any better. His body continuously emitted flashes of starlight, seemingly about to collapse. If the battle could go on endlessly, then the losing party ought to be Shu Ran. The reason was very simple. Ling Han's body was the level of godly metal. There was no solution to this. Stop. The Tool Spirit finally called a halt to the battle. The starlight of Shu Ran's body immediately transformed into countless spots of light and dissipated. It paused, and said, "This battle shall be considered a draw. You are indeed very strong. If your strength further increases by 1 star, then perhaps you can replace me and become the new guard here." Ling Han gave a faint smile. He was only interested in going all out to battle a strong opponent, wasn't inclined to care about being a replacement, especially when there wasn't anything good to be gained from it. He would hardly bother himself with such trouble. "You may enter the 2nd level." A flight of stairs appeared in front of Ling Han. He strode forward and ascended the stairs to the 2nd level. The following tests would be the same as that on the 1st level. It would still be based on one's practice of martial arts techniques and using the strength of the spirit to strike the Jade Plaque, only that the difficulty of martial arts techniques would increase, and the Jade Plaque would also be strengthened, making it more and more challenging. At the 3rd stage, Ling Han didn't need to be tested again. He automatically passed it. He had spent too much time on the 1st level. 3 speedy people had already rushed to the 3rd level. However, starting from the 2nd level, Ling Han's speed became faster as he made haste to catch up. "Look! The 5th level of the tower has lit up. Who is it? So impressive. It must be Fairy Ji. She is someone who is on par with Luo Ba and Lin Yu. Since those two could pass through the 5th level, then Fairy Ji is certainly no exception. Could it be a dark horse like Ma Xing? Haha, you think too much. There can't be that many exceptions." Outside, everyone was in the midst of a heated discussion, while the higher-ups of the Northern Institution were also paying close attention to the assessment. After all, the competition amongst the 4 institutions was extremely fierce. Which one of them wouldn't want to emerge superior to the other 3 institutions? "Hey, the 5th level of the tower has lit up again. Are you seeing things?" "Impossible. I am quite sure that the level has already gotten dark, and then lit up again." "That's correct. By right, it shouldn't be lighting up for so long. There must be a second person who had passed the 5th level. Good gracious. There are so many geniuses in this round of the assessment. In the past, it would have been quite amazing to have 2 to 3 1-star geniuses. Now, there's actually 5 of them. Gosh, I might have been able to charge to the top 10 in the past, but now, I guess there's no hope for me." "You really think too much. Even if in the past, there also wouldn't be the slightest possibility for you to achieve it." After a while, the 6th level of the tower was illuminated. What? Everyone was astounded this time. The 6th level of the tower had lit up again. This was the 2nd time previously, only Ma Xing had passed through the 6th level. Could it be Fairy Ji? She is much more of a genius compared to Luo Ba and Lin Yu. Really unexpected. The higher the level, the longer the tower's level would be lit. For example, the 1st level and the 2nd level had only lit up for about half of a heartbeat's time, but the illumination of the tower's 6th level was flashing for at least 10 heartbeats before it dimmed. The upper echelons of the Northern Institution were indescribably pleased. How many years would it take before they could meet any future 2-star genius? It was at this moment that the tower's 6th level was illuminated again. Oh my goodness! The 3rd 2-star genius. Who could it be? One of them must be Fairy Ji, but what about the other one? Everyone was holding their heads in their hands. Being able to pass through to the 5th level was acceptable, But now it was really too exaggerated. One couldn't look at it as merely passing through one more level. Between a 1-star genius and a 2-star genius was a world of difference. Luo Ba clenched his teeth, had always set his sights on Ji Yuna. Moreover, the status of Ji clan was slightly inferior to that of the Luo clan. He had intended to ask his clan to propose marriage to the Ji clan after he had entered Scarlet Heaven Academy. But now, if Ji Yuna really became a 2-star genius, then would the Ji clan still approve of this marriage proposal? Probably not, as they would definitely look for a more outstanding candidate to become the husband of Ji Yuna. One couldn't just look at him as currently being one of the 3 elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital. After 5 years, things would change. After the 3 of them entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy, naturally there would be new 3 great elites of the younger generation, or 4 great elites, or 5 great elites and the like. No, he had to find a way. Since Ji Yuna was so outstanding, then all the more he couldn't give in to others. Heavens! The 5th level of the tower has lit up again. Everyone was shocked dumb. Sure enough, the 5th level of the White Star Tower had lit up again. The 6th one. But, the previous batch of people had passed through at about the same time. This person is only now passing through the 5th level. It should be that the person's potential has all but been exhausted, so it is impossible to go to the 6th level, some people speculated. This gained the agreement from the majority of the people who nodded their heads. A person who had the strength to pass through the 6th level would have been able to pass through the previous 5 levels easily. It wouldn't be like the case now, when others had passed through the 6th level while that person was only passing through the 5th level. Right. Obviously, that person's strength wasn't good enough. That person was Ling Han, of course. He was leisurely passing through the 6th level. No one was going to drive him out anyway, and it was not that he was in a hurry. However, as he didn't have to fight on the 3rd level, his speed was actually getting a lot faster. At this time, most people had left the White Star Tower, while the strongest had already rushed to the 6th level. Those people at the lower levels wouldn't be able to drag their assessment out any longer. There are still 3 people in the tower. The higher-ups of the academy had confirmed with the Tool Spirit, and subsequently announced it. One of the 3 was definitely Ji Yuna. This was obvious as she had yet to come out after she had entered. Who wouldn't recognize this brilliant pearl whose name was famous throughout the imperial capital? However, no one else knew who the other 2 were. Could it be that the blockhead had passed through the 5th level, and even the 6th level? Li Weiwei's face was filled with astonishment. Then, she stomped her foot angrily. Doesn't that mean I have lost to him again? Ah, damn. This is horrible. Just then, the 6th level of the tower lit up again. Pu. Those who had confidently said before that it was impossible for Ling Han to pass through the 6th level now coughed awkwardly, their faces filled with embarrassment. Fuck. This face-slapping was extremely painful indeed. Since you can pass through the 6th level, why don't you get a move on? How could there be someone like you who would torment other people? Someone has come out. A man was seen coming out of the entrance to the 9-storied tower. He was a young man clothed in embroidered robes, but almost no one could recognize him. However, everyone knew that anyone that came out would be a genius who had passed through 6 levels of the tower. I know him. His name is Cheng Haofei. He's a descendant of the Cheng clan. Cheng clan? The same Cheng clan as that of the Minister of War, Lord Cheng? Other than the Minister of War, Lord Cheng, what other clan would dare to be addressed as the Cheng clan? That old man in the corner shook his head in disappointment. Although that junior of his was expected to become a 2-star genius, and indeed shocked the world with an amazing feat, he still fell short of his expectations. Damn, why would there be 3 6th-level geniuses? Chapter 897 8 levels. Chapter 897, 8 levels. Although Cheng Haofei was somewhat disappointed, he still appeared to be full of confidence. He had passed through the first 2 stages of assessment on the 7th level, but did not manage to take on the 10 strikes from Shu Ran. This meant that he still had plenty of room for improvement. After all, his talent had been clearly exhibited there. As long as he were to engage in more battles or cultivate some secret technique, then his battle prowess would improve by leaps and bounds. He remained completely unaware that there were two other people in the tower. Bearing an extremely confident smile, he faced everyone, intending to receive a tsunami of cheers, as well as the envious gazes of men and looks of adoration from women. But he was disappointed. Almost everyone was looking up at the White Star Tower, and apparently didn't realize his emergence as a super genius. Fuck, what was going on? What's this situation? Cheng Haofei couldn't stop a muscle in his cheek from twitching. This was a scenario that he had never expected. He nearly tripped over his own feet, and couldn't help stumbling a few steps. Calming himself down, he walked back, feigning disinterest. In actual fact, though, he pricked up his ears to listen carefully. It turned out that there were two more people in the White Star Tower, and they had all passed through the previous 6 levels. What? The appearance of Ma Xing aside, there were actually two other people who could be on equal level with himself. As such, he probably couldn't not even keep his second place, and could even have slipped out of the top 3 and fallen onto the 4th position. Fuck. To hell with it. Had he known earlier, he would have waited another 5 years. He did not believe that so many geniuses would emerge in the next 5-year period. But now, he could only wait in the hopes that the other two in the tower were not that much of a genius compared to him. Even if he couldn't get first place, he could at least steadily remain in second place. However, although everyone was concerned about the results of the remaining two, the higher-ups of the Northern Institution had already summoned Cheng Haofei. Of course, they had to get acquainted with such a genius, and probably reap some benefits, lest he might choose to directly renounce his enrollment into the institution and enter the Eastern Institution. 5 years later they would then be chopped to pieces by the head of the Northern Institution. After a while, the 7th level of the tower glowed. This time, everyone had gone numb with shock. Passing through 7 levels, what kind of notion was this? 3-star genius. He wouldn't be weaker than Ma Xing, truly not weak at all. It was necessary to know that Ma Xing had the potential to become a 3-star genius by relying on King's Qi. But now, another's potential had jumped straight to 3-star level. Moreover, cultivators could later cultivate King's Qi wasn't an advantage that naturally belonged to some people. Who was it? Ultimately, who could it be? Not long later, a woman in a fluttering white dress, with flowing black hair like a waterfall and exquisite appearance of a fairy, was seen walking out. Big Sister Yoon. Li Weiwei quickly ran over, and exclaimed, "Congratulations to Big Sister Yoon for passing the 7th level of the tower. In the future, you will be stepping into the immortal level as a 3-star genius." The rest of the people nodded their heads in agreement. It didn't take long for Ji Yuna to appear after the 7th level of the tower had lit up. Obviously, she had to have passed through the 7th level, but lost at the 8th level, and thus retreated. Oh, 7th level. Even for a magnificent and vast country like the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, only one could emerge after thousands of years. The pretty face of Ji Yuna changed color, and she said, "I did not pass the 7th level. I lost at the 3rd stage." "What?" Li Weiwei exclaimed. "What?" the others also exclaimed. It actually wasn't Ji Yuna. How could that be? Li Weiwei held her head in her hands in dismay, and kept stomping her foot, saying, "Unbelievable. No, I don't believe this. Really, it was that blockhead indeed. Arg, I want to trample him to death." It wasn't that it had never crossed her mind that the person who had passed through the 7th level of the tower could be Ling Han, but such a thought only appeared for a moment before it vanished. Who asked him be put together in comparison with Ji Yuna? But now, Ji Yuna had already admitted upfront that she wasn't the person who had passed through the 7th level of the tower. So, there was only one person left. Ling Han. A cultivator who had come from the lower realm, an insignificant ant who would not be held in any regard by anyone of the immortal realm. Li Weiwei was finally convinced. How could an emperor who had broken history by splitting open the sky to come into the immortal realm be simple? "Weiwei, do you know this person?" Ji Yuna could immediately guessed, having observed the change in color on Li Weiwei's face. Li Weiwei nodded, and said, "He is a cultivator from a small world who had arrived here at the immortal realm about 10 days ago." Ji Yuna. A cultivator from a small world? This was impossible. How could the cultivation environment of a small world compare with the immortal realm? Could the abundance of resources there be compared with that of the immortal realm? Could the elites there be compared with the immortal realm? Everything there was infinitely lagging behind, and it could be regarded as a barren land. But it was a person who came from such a barren land that had accomplished an amazing feat passed through the 7th level of the tower. This kind of aptitude could be ranked within the top 10 in the entire Scarlet Heaven Academy. The higher-ups of the Northern Institution were extremely excited. They gained much in this session of examination. Not only did 3 great geniuses came, but the performance of Ji Yuna showed that she had the potential of being a 2-star genius. In addition, 3 dark horses had appeared, and the one whose performance was the least of the lot also showed the potential of being a 2-star genius. As for the other 2, one possessed King's Chi, while the other had the potential to become a 3-star genius. Northern Institution would flourish. However, this was yet to be the climax. Mere moments later, the 8th level of the tower was illuminated. Goodness! I'm not mistaken, right? Had the moonlight suddenly become brighter, or is the 8th level really glowing? It's impossible that all of us also got it wrong. It is true that the 8th level of the tower has been lit. 4-star genius. At this time, the higher-ups of the Northern Institution were all unable to sit still, and came out together to wait beneath the White Star Tower, itching to meet with this super genius. 4-star genius, what kind of notion was this? This empire's left and right ministers, as well as the 7 generals, were 4-star geniuses. What kind of beings were these 9 people? They were the cornerstone of the chaotic star's majestic empire, practically standing at the summit of this planet. Aside from shock, everyone was also looking forward to know whether the person inside the tower could pass through the 9th level and become what was known only in Legensa 5-star genius. This freak, Li Weiwei muttered to herself. Had she not seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed that arrogant prick could actually become a 4-star genius. When she thought of Ling Han, being arrogant and appearing full of confidence, she felt a kind of crazy urge to smash his face. Inside the tower, the gateway to the 9th level had been opened, but Ling Han stopped in his tracks, saying to himself, "Should I go up to the 9th level? Forget it, I should be able to take the 1st place now. There's no need to display my entire capacity for everyone's knowledge. Now I am a 4-star genius, so the Academy will definitely focus on nurturing me." While a 4-star genius is outstanding, the history of the Academy hasn't been without the appearance of such geniuses. However, as for 5-star, perhaps it might not be a good thing. A 5-star genius might even trigger the interference of the Empress, so much so that she might even have him investigated thoroughly to find out his secret for being so powerful. How could someone from a small world be so powerful? Honestly, if it wasn't for the sake of getting the 1st place, Ling Han would actually prefer to stop after passing through the 7th level. However, being a 3-star genius might not have been enough to suppress Ma Xing. Meanwhile, being a 4-star genius would definitely be more than enough to do so. As he thought about it this way, he turned around without hesitation. He didn't even go up to the 9th level. Chapter 898 Reward. Chapter 898 Reward. When Ling Han came out of the White Star Tower, he saw that all eyes were focused on him. He couldn't help but think to himself, it seems that passing through the 8th level was a bit of an overkill. If I had known earlier, I would have stopped after passing through 7th level. "Child, what is your name?" An old man had rushed over and almost threw himself at Ling Han. He looked at Ling Han with a heated gaze as if the latter wasn't a full-grown man, but rather a beautiful fairy whose beauty was beyond compare. Ling Han suppressed the impulse to throw a punch. The old man's face was about to stick to him. Ling Han had no choice. In his excitement, the old man did not hide his own cultivation. There was a round of suns and moons behind him, meaning that he was an elite whose cultivation was of the minor levels of the sun-moon tier. If Ling Han were to throw this punch, he would definitely lose his life in the next second. Without losing his cool, he took a step back, and said, "I am Ling Han." Although his combined age after having lived 2 lifetimes would be about 200 years old, his age wasn't even worth mentioning in the face of a sun-moon tier cultivator. Actually, even if his age was to be multiplied by 100, It wouldn't even be a fraction of the other party's age. Ling Han, kneel down quickly and perform the rites of a disciple. I am accepting you as my disciple, the old man quickly said. Get lost. An angry shout was heard as another old man rushed over and directly knocked against the previous old man, sending him flying. He bellowed, "This is my disciple." Nonsense. The previous old man immediately leapt back and came to blows with the second old man. Hee. The third old man came out, beaming at Ling Han as he said, "Kid, I am Elder Zhong Deman, Elder of Northern Institution by rotation. Come and pay respects to me as your master. With me as your backing, in the future, you can beat up whomever you want." Was this something a master should say? Old man Zhong, you dare to fight with me over a disciple? The fourth old man appeared, glaring at Zhong Deman. That's right, old man Zhong. You are really too despicable. Taking advantage of us fighting to snatch away our disciple. The two old men from before had stopped fighting and walked back one after the other. Kid, who are you taking as your master? The four old men simultaneously turned to look at Ling Han. This made everyone witnessing the scene filled with envy. Being fought over by four elites of the Sun Moon tier, all wanting to take him as their disciple, wasn't this the highest honor? If this were to happen in one's lifetime, then what more could one ask for? Don't look at the fact that there were also elites of the Genesis tier in the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. In reality, how many of these elites were there? The Sun Moon tier cultivators were actually the backbone of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Cultivators of the Genesis tier were more for the purpose of intimidation, and in general wouldn't make a move that easily. Of course, the Sun Moon tier was also divided into 4 levels. These 4 old men were all at the minor levels, the lowest level within the Sun Moon tier. Stop wasting time. Go and sort out the admission procedure for everyone. Just then, a middle-aged man was seen flying over and stood at the peak of the 9-storied tower, giving instructions to those below. Although his voice wasn't very loud, it reverberated straight into the hearts of the people. Yes, Lord Deputy Head. The 4 old men quickly bowed and paid their respects. Only then did everyone realize that this seemingly younger man was stronger than the 4 old men. This was slightly inconceivable, but the higher one's cultivation was, the longer one's life expectancy would be, while the rate of aging would on the contrary be slower. As such, in terms of real age, perhaps this middle-aged man was a lot older than Zhong Deman and the others. Given the instructions of the deputy head, Zhong Deman and the others naturally did not dare to continue fighting, and quickly made arrangements for those who had passed the assessment to be brought to the student dorms of the Northern Institution. Meanwhile, the group including Ling Han, Ma Xing, Cheng Haofei, and Ji Yuna was asked to stay back. The top 10 finalists were to be rewarded. The rewards for the top 7 were very simple. Each person would receive a true origin stone. As for the top 3, the rewards were much more substantial. Without a doubt, Ling Han was naturally the first, but the candidates for the second and third place, respectively, needed to be discussed. Ma Xing, Cheng Haofei, and Ji Yuna had all completed the challenges of the first 6 levels, and also passed the first 2 stages on the 7th level. Who ought to be in the second place, third, and fourth, respectively? After a round of discussion among the higher-ups of the institution, it was decided that Ma Xing would be in the second place, while Cheng Haofei and Ji Yuna were tied for third place. While this would require the Northern Institution to spend more resources on them, the Northern Institution was originally wealthy and imposing. Besides, they were cultivators of the Shattering Void tier, after all, so the amount of resources they would consume was limited. The top 3 students would get to enjoy great privileges. For example, they would be given a chance to bathe in the Black Jade Pool once a month. That wasn't to let you wash yourself clean. Black Jade Pool was a spiritual pool, something naturally formed of the heavens and the earth, that would provide the topmost nourishment for the body and spirit of cultivators. Moreover, after being taken over by the Scarlet Heaven Academy, a lot of precious treasures had been added into the pool to further enhance its effects. However, this pool would only be effective for those of the Shattering Void tier and Mountain River tier. It would have no effect for those of higher levels, or else it wouldn't have been placed in the Scarlet Heaven Academy. Even if it wasn't confiscated by the Imperial clan, wouldn't there still be the 9 kings, left and right ministers, as well as the 7 generals. Secondly, they would get 2 true origin stones every month as a reward. Those were an item unique to the immortal realm. Due to the presence of high density of spiritual chi of the heaven and earth here, it was turned into an essence with the appearance of a jade, whereby its energy could be extracted to be used by cultivators. Whether for purposes of cultivation or restoration, it would be an excellent supplementary artifact. Of course, using it to restore origin power would be too extravagant. As this item was extremely valuable, it was a treasure in itself. In addition, true origin stone could also be used as currency to buy precious items as well as in exchange for gold and silver, but it was believed that only fools would do this. Thirdly, there would be an extra replenishing spirit pill each month. Replenishing spirit pill could strengthen the spirit, and would be effective for the shattering void tier and immortal level. However, the immortals were just too powerful, and the effects of the replenishing spirit pill were just too pathetically little. Generally, the immortals would consume the star young pill. Its effect was much more powerful by countless times, but the degree of its preciousness would also be more excessive by countless times. As long as one was a disciple of the academy, one would get a replenishing spirit pill every month. The third place candidate would get an extra one, the second would receive 2, while the first be given 3. True origin stone and replenishing spirit pill were immediately handed out, but entering the black jade pool would have to wait until the following month. This was because the time allowed for the respective 4 institutions to enter the black jade pool had already been allocated earlier. The northern institution had already used up its time for this month. After Ling Han and the others had gotten their rewards, they subsequently went to the place they would be living in for the next few years, or 10 years, or even decades. Unless they were able to break through to the immortal level, they would always be staying here. Along the way, Zhong Daman was responsible for informing them of certain rules. For example, one shouldn't walk into the territory of the other 3 institutions for no reason, unless you were exceptionally strong. Else, you had to be prepared to be thoroughly thrashed. The academy would encourage its students to learn from one another, but in principle, it was forbidden for high-level students to battle with low-level students unless the lower-level students had taken the initiative to provoke the former. Finally, Zhong Daman said something very strange. Also, there is a white cat here. You must not be tempted to provoke that cat by all means. You mustn't hurt even a single strand of its hair, otherwise no one can save you. Why? Everyone was absolutely baffled. Chapter 899, The Cat That Mustn't Be Trifled With. Chapter 899, The Cat That Mustn't Be Trifled With. So powerful? What kind of cat is it? Li Weiwei asked. She was the daughter of the left minister, so she was naturally bold, without much reverence towards Zhong Daman. She was not afraid that he would rebuke her. Sure enough, Zhong Daman just smiled, and said, I'm not sure what is so special about the cat, but its owner, hehe, that person would be our Lord Head. Would that be Lord Yang Dongqi, head of Northern Institution? Li Weiwei asked again. Zhong Daman shook his head in reply, saying, No, it is Lord Fu Fu Hui. At this moment, everyone's expression was filled with awe. Even Li Weiwei was gaping slightly, revealing an expression full of reverence. Fu Hui was the head of the Scarlet Heaven Academy, not the Northern Institution. He was an elite of the heavenly body tier, but no one knew the details about his cultivation level, as this elite tended to spend most of his time cultivating in seclusion. This was precisely the reason why the 4 major institutions of the Scarlet Heaven Academy tended to do things their own way, giving rise to fierce competition amongst the institutions. The 4 main institutions also had their respective heads, known as heads of the institution, but their cultivation level was at the perfection level of the Sun-Moon tier. Within the chaotic star's majestic empire, they could be considered the top elites. However, one shouldn't look at it as if it was only a difference of 1 level between the Sun-Moon tier and heavenly body tier. The gap of this 1 level was extremely large. Forget about the 1-star or 2-star geniuses, even a 5-star genius wouldn't be able to cross over and break through the barrier of such a level. Even though Li Weiwei, Ma Xing, and others were super geniuses, none of them would dare to say that they could step into the heavenly body tier in the future. Even reaching the Sun-Moon tier would already be extremely difficult. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that among each batch of students recruited once every 5 years, about 90% of them could step into the mountain river tier. After all, those who were recruited were already geniuses themselves. However, only 1/10 of them could possibly reach the middle levels, while those who could attain major accomplishment would only be about 10%, and the rest that might be able to reach the level of perfection would be 1 in 1,000. At most, there would only be 1 in 10,000 who could step into the Sun-Moon tier. However, how many students were recruited each time? Therefore, it was considered quite normal not to have anyone reach the Sun-Moon tier in one or even in a few batches of students. With such a comparison, one should know just how formidable those of the heavenly body tier were. The white cat is the pet of head Fu, who likes it very much. So, even if the white cat loosens its bowels on your head, you must endure it. In the past, someone had slapped the white cat. That person was then crippled by Lord Fu and expelled. Zhong Diman said solemnly. Hey, could that VE been the 7th young master of the Ari clan? Someone queried. His surname was indeed Ari, he was called Ari Song. Zhong Diman nodded in response. The Ari clan might not be a top-ranking clan, but it is also quite high-ranking among the second-class clans. Lord Fu actually didn't even give them any face. Hiss. Never provoke the cat. Everyone gave a cold shudder. There was none who didn't think that since that cat mustn't be provoked, and giving it a slap would face such miserable consequences, then if one was to grab a handful of its fur, what kind of miserable fate would await that person? Most of the people would stay in the dormitory arranged by the academy, but a small number of people merely strolled around the academy, and would return to stay in their own homes at night. Descendants of influential officials, such as Li Weiwei, would naturally choose whether to come to the academy or not depending on their mood. Linghan finally had his own home. The Scarlet Heaven Academy was massive. Everyone was given their own courtyard. Even though it wasn't very big, there was a garden, a living room, and a bedroom. It could be said that even though it was small, it was completely furnished with all necessities. He was very satisfied. After sitting for a while, he began to consider his next move. Making money. He had first defined a goal. Of course, it wouldn't be gold and silver, but rather the true origin stones. It was the hard currency of the immortal realm, just like the gold and silver of the small world. With money, one could buy all kinds of resources. How to make money? Linghan stroked his chin. Subconsciously, he took out the food in the Black Tower and started cooking. A few days ago, when he was staying in the Left Minister's residence, he remained very low-key, cultivating in seclusion, but now, this place was his territory, so his mind suddenly relaxed a lot. He had spent too much time with Hu Nyohe would also begin thinking about food when he had nothing else to do. Alas, I wonder how Hu Nyo, my parents, Helian Zun Shui, and my son are doing right now. Hey, can the food in the Black Tower be taken out for sale? This ought to be feasible. The food in the Black Tower was so delicious that even the immortals would drool over them. After all, the immortals were only more powerful in strength, and weren't pure-minded monks with scant desires. Otherwise, why would there be so many strong people remaining in the position of power? However, which restaurant would let the bills be settled with true origin stones? And if he wanted to deliver the food straight to the households of high-ranking officials or local tycoons, he would need to have the right connections. That's right. Linghan clasped his hands together. Isn't Li Weiwei the right connection? If the daughter of the left minister wanted to do business, then who would not give her face? Anyway, the ingredients in the Black Tower didn't need any capital, so even if the profits of the sales were to be divided equally with Li Weiwei, it wouldn't matter much. After all, the one with the connection would be king. Linghan nodded. In addition, he could also concoct alchemical pills such as this replenishing spirit pill, which would be extremely popular amongst those of the Shattering Void tier and Mountain River tier, and it would not be bought with gold or silver, but with true origin stone. Alchemy was his old business, and he was the best at it. In his past life, there was no knowing how much he had earned from this trade. Even the proud and arrogant Sword Emperor and the setting Sun Saber Emperor at that time also had to bow their heads to him. This was also one way of doing it. Letting Li Weiwei help in liaising with the customers was putting his life in the hands of another, after all. That kind of young miss, there was no knowing when she might change her mind. Meanwhile, concocting alchemical pills would be different. Once the pills had been refined, how could he possibly be afraid of not being able to sell them? Where was that barbecued meat that he had put on the grill? Ling Han had just released the gold-seeking rat from the Black Tower. Now that he had brought this little guy, his talent was indeed very helpful. But when he turned around, the 2 pieces of meat on the grill that were nearly roasted had gone missing. He couldn't help but be surprised. That meat was practically stolen from right under his nose without him realizing it. The other party's movement was extremely fast, and the actions were also very nimble. It was quite astonishing. However, when his eyes swept across the vicinity, he almost choked. On the wall of the courtyard, a fat white cat was seen having a hearty meal, and what its mouth was nibbling was naturally the roasted meat that Ling Han was missing. Zhong Demand's words immediately flashed through Ling Han's mind. The big white cat. Fuck, it wouldn't be such a coincidence, right? Ling Han's mouth slightly twitched. On his first day of entering the academy, he had already met the legendary white cat that couldn't be provoked. This cat is so vile to steal things the moment it appears. The big white cat also realized that it had been caught by Ling Han, but it didn't show any fear like a thief being caught in the act. Instead, it cried out meow towards Ling Han. Its voice wasn't loud, but carried the hint of a tiger cub's soft roar. It nibbled at the meat again, bearing a vile expression as if saying, "Come and bite me if you dare." Ling Han felt a sudden urge to strike it, only to remember that it wasn't without reason that the former senior brother disciple couldn't help but hit this big white cat. He snorted, and said, "Little thief, I will forego this one meal. I'll consider it as my treat to you. However, don't think you can steal again." This big white cat was merely in the shattering void tier. Even if its body was agile and its speed was amazing, as long as Ling Han remained vigilant, he would definitely not let the other party succeed again. Meow. The white cat cried out arrogantly, which meant if I want to eat, then could you stop me? It picked up the rest of the meat and left abruptly with a leap. Chapter 900 Fine, as long as you pay. Chapter 900 Fine, as long as you pay. On his first day of entering the Scarlet Heaven Academy, a fat white cat came and put on airs to establish its authority. Ling Han gave a sigh. This isn't a good start. After a good night's rest, he went to attend class the next day. On this day, a teacher would come to explain to them some secrets regarding the cultivation of the shattering void tier. On one hand, he had some interest in the subject, and on the other, he wanted to meet with Li Weiwei in order to discuss with her about doing business. Naturally, he wouldn't be cutting classes. He arrived neither too early nor too late. By the time that he had arrived, he saw that about 1/3 of the seats in the classroom had already been occupied. The classroom was large enough to accommodate about 500 people. This batch of newly recruited students was less than 500, so the place was sufficient to accommodate all the new students. Senior Brother Ling, Ling Han. Upon seeing Ling Han, quite a lot of people came up to greet him and appeared to be exceptionally warm. Only a minority of talented individuals showed indifferent expressions, apparently not willing to fawn over Ling Han. This was something quite normal for everyone. A 4-star genius, how many were there in the entire chaotic star's majestic empire? More importantly, the assessment of the White Star Tower included up to 5-star genius, which meant that Ling Han was qualified to climb to the highest level of martial arts. Perhaps, he would be an elite of the heavenly body tier a million years later. Of course, given that a period of a million years was really long, innumerable changes could happen in between. Perhaps Ling Han would have already died by then. This was also the reason why some people held themselves to be above politics and worldly considerations. After all, at present, only Ling Han's talent had been exhibited. There was no knowing how strong he would be in actual combat. If they had known that Ling Han had been equally matched against Shu Rant's spirit, then a lot of people would likely change their minds immediately. Ling Han just smiled and nodded his head in greeting towards everyone. He had always been a person who would return the kindness of others tenfold, but if the other person were to walk all over or provoke him, he would absolutely show no mercy. Humph. Shameless. The Luo brothers came as well. Naturally, they wouldn't be bothered to suck up to Ling Han. Both brothers bore fiery gazes. Who would have thought that an insignificant ant of a small world would actually seize first place in the assessment this time? Ha ha ha. Luo Ba suddenly faced upwards and let out a few howls. Whom this was directed at was obvious. Senior brother Luo, what do you mean by this? Someone asked. Although Luo Ba was very strong, the strength of the Luo clan wasn't considered top tier within the imperial capital, so someone was naturally bold enough to argue with him. I guess all of you still have no idea this Ling Han, senior brother Ling, hehe, it was only but a few days ago that he flew up here from a small world. Luo Ba unveiled a big secret. What? Everyone cried out in surprise. He was an insignificant ant from a small world. Suddenly, many people revealed expressions of disgust. How could they humble themselves to make the acquaintance of such a lowlife? Yet, there were also some people who expressed even more admiration. A person from a small world could actually be so amazing. It really wasn't easy. The attitudes of the students had undergone extreme polarization. This was a deeply rooted notion. Some people were of the view that a small world was too primitive and too backward, and showed extreme disdain. Ling Han. Luo Ba couldn't help but smile. He reached out and said, "Did you forget what I said yesterday? Do you dare to spar with me?" Spar? What right do you have to spar with me? Are you even qualified to spar with me? Although Ling Han wasn't a vain person, he absolutely didn't have a good impression of Luo Ba, and so wouldn't give any face to the other party. Luo Ba was so angry that he stomped his foot. He was one of the 3 great elites of the younger generation in the imperial capital. It couldn't be that he wasn't even qualified to spar with Ling Han, right? He forced down his boiling anger, and said, "I want to duel with you." "Fine, pay me an appearance fee. Otherwise, there's nothing to discuss." Ling Han said. "It's not much, just give 10 true origin stones, but if I win, then you would have to compensate me another 100. Fart. Many people laughed out loud. This senior brother Ling was a really shrewd person, even trying to make money out of a duel. Luo Ba had wanted to agree at once, but quickly restrained himself. Although he was the leader of the younger generation of Luo clan, it was slightly difficult for him to take out 10 true origin stones in one go. The crucial point was, he might be able to take out 10 true origin stones, but what if he lost? 100 true origin stones was a very huge amount indeed, at least it was beyond his control. Ling Han's performance was quite amazing, so he had to consider the possibility of losing. At first, it wasn't a big deal. His ranking was below that of Ling Han, so no one would laugh at him even if he lost. But if he won, then he would be able to trample all over the glory surrounding Ling Han for getting first place. Yet now, with such a high stake, he dared not agree so easily. Unless he could be certain of defeating Ling Han. Coward, do you intend to use this method to avoid a duel? Luo Ba certainly wouldn't lose on his stand. Ling Han waved his hand dismissively, saying, "Stop talking about such trivial matters. If you want to fight, I can accept your challenge, but there's nothing to discuss if you don't have true origin stones. Do you think that my time isn't valuable like yours? Poor people without true origin stones should refrain from whining." Luo Ba was seething with so much anger that he almost agreed, but he still managed to forcibly restrain himself. He had to be 100% sure of gaining victory. Ha 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 ha. Amidst the jingle-like laughter, 2 beautiful women were seen coming in from the door, one clothed in green robes, tender and charming, while the other appeared elegant like a fairy in flowing white robes. Both women had their respective strengths. While their temperaments were completely different, both were charming all the same, causing others to be intoxicated with their beauty. They were Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna, 2 of the 3 great beauties of the imperial capital. Well said, Ling Han. Li Weiwei came over and showed her support for Ling Han. "He is my man, ah." She immediately realized her own mistake, and quickly corrected herself, adding, "No, no, no. He is a man of the left minister's residence, and my follower. If any of you dare to bully him, then you will stand as my enemy. You had better consider the consequences." Although there was no shortage of descendants of influential officials in the Scarlet Heaven Academy, was there anyone whose status was higher than that of the daughter of the left minister, at least in this batch. Those who had felt disdain for Ling Han earlier humphed. Although they didn't dare to confront Li Weiwei, they also certainly wouldn't take to heart Li Weiwei's words. After all, Ling Han only flew up here from a small world about 10 days ago. He would be categorized as one with neither foundation nor backing, so what if they were to trample on him? Ling Han looked at Li Weiwei and smiled. How come you are suddenly so nice to me? I'm somewhat not used to it. TSK. Of course, I still detest you very much, blockhead. But you are my follower, and only I can bully you. If other people can also do that, then wouldn't they be on the same level as me? Of course, that cannot be allowed. Li Weiwei raised her chin proudly, revealing her porcelain neck, beautifully white and tender as a swan's. Its beauty was beyond one's imagination. Ling Han burst out laughing, not taking her words to heart, and said, "Drop by my place later, I have something to discuss with you." Damn blockhead, don't tell me that you have designs on me. Li Weiwei suddenly looked alarmed. Don't think that you can make me sleep with you. In your dreams. Ling Han was dumbstruck. This little girl is too open-minded. Also, what could she be thinking about all day? Chapter 901, Class Starts. Chapter 901, Class Starts. What Li Weiwei was thinking about all day was naturally what every young woman would be thinking about. When they met a Prince Charming who was handsome, dashing, and with abilities so strong no precedent or antecedent existed, they thought about him having a wonderful romance with themselves. Since her losing to Ling Han, this blockhead would occasionally appear in her dreams. He actually interfered in the love between herself and her Prince Charming, and actually wanted to snatch her away. Unfortunately, it was all in her dreamscape, and she had no ability to resist. Thus, she was always bullied by Ling Han. This made the fourth young miss of the Li clan very upset. Every time she woke up, she would be gritting her teeth in resentment. She had not yet given Ling Han a good thrashing, and this guy had already bullied her quite a few times in her dreams. There was nothing that could be done. Who asked the fourth young Mrs. status to be too noble? If she sparred with someone, the other would usually go easy on her, yet she was horribly defeated by Ling Han, and that was indeed an unforgettable experience. Hence, when she heard Ling Han invite her to his residence, Li Weiwei immediately exercised her abundant imagination, and thought that this blockhead had some evil designs on her, so she naturally blurted out her thoughts. You aren't satisfied with just bullying me in my dreams, and still want to force yourself on me? Weiwei. Ji Yuna hurriedly pulled Li Weiwei back, afraid that she would say something else that was incredibly shocking. Li Weiwei covered her mouth, realizing that she had blurted something unbelievable out. Then, she immediately glared at Ling Han. This was naturally Ling Han's fault. Who asked him to always embarrass me in my dreams? The two girls found a spot to sit down. This immediately attracted a great many to approach them and attempt to strike up a conversation. They had their eyes either on the beauty of these two women, or Li Weiwei's noble status. Was the daughter of the left minister not awesome enough? Ma Xing is here, someone announced, and everyone turned to look at the door. They saw a sturdy young man walk in. Both his arms were bare, and he exuded a wild air, practically strong enough to cause suffocation. Perhaps his king's chi had developed precisely from his long-term contact with wild beasts. Ma Xing looked as if he had not fully woken yet. He looked like he could barely keep his eyes open. However, when he entered the classroom and saw Ling Han, that hazy gaze immediately became bright and alert. He stared at Ling Han, and said, "Ling Han, I want to spar with you." "All right." Ling Han nodded. "If you want me to move, please pay 10 true origin stones first. If you lose, you have to pay another 100. I have to check the payment first as I cannot possibly fight for nothing." Many laughed loudly. Ling Han's money-grubbing tendencies were really too overwhelming. Li Weiwei grabbed her head and murmured, "This shameful guy, fancy that I stood up for him just now. Now, he has caused even me to be embarrassed." Yet Ji Yuna smiled, and as her beautiful eyes swept over Ling Han, a hint of curiosity filled her gaze. What kind of man was this person? Abruptly, Ma Xing's aura was stifled. He had come from the wilderness, so how could he possibly possess any true origin stones? After being dazed for a moment, he finally replied, "All right, when I have so many true origin stones, we shall fight. He was much more decisive than Luo Ba, and many who saw this nodded in approval. He was really proving himself as one who had come from the wilderness. He had a very straightforward, decisive character. Ma Xing no longer stared at Ling Han. As his eyes swept over and he spotted Ji Yuna, he immediately walked over and said, "Beauty, I like you. Why don't we eat some meat together later on?" Damn. A considerable number of people choked directly. They had seen people who were straightforward in their speech, but to be straightforward to this degree. This was really the first time they had seen such a person. It was nothing strange to like Ji Yuna. She had enough admirers to line up in a queue that could encircle the whole capital city 3 times. Still, Ma Xing was definitely the first to be so straightforward about it. Additionally, how could you woo a girl like that? You actually bluntly expressed the desire to treat her to meat. Were you planning to use this to bribe Fairy Ji? It was really silly to an adorable degree. Ji Yuna smiled reservedly, and replied, "I have something else on after class. If there is a chance in future, I will share a meal with senior brother Ma." "Big sister Yun, what do you have on?" Li Weiwei deliberately asked, her head tilted to one side as if in doubt. She was someone who wanted the whole world in chaos. Ji Yuna directly used a finger to tap her small head, and after rolling her eyes, said, "Have you forgotten? I will be accompanying you later so that you won't have to worry you will be falling into someone's trap." "Oh." Li Weiwei nodded, and tugging on Ji Yuna's arm, said, Right. You have to protect me. If there are 2 of us, that blockhead would definitely not dare to act rashly." After being gently refused, Ma Xing could not help but scratch his head. Then, he sat down at one side. Soon, he sprawled out on his table and began sleeping. His snoring was as loud as thunder. Indeed, he had not woken up fully. Li Weiwei immediately leaned towards Ji Yuna's ear, and said, "Big sister Yun, you definitely can't like this guy. He snores like a pig, and if you marry him, you would have to suffer every single day." Ji Yuna rolled her eyes again. Everything about this best friend of hers was great, except for the fact that she had an overactive imagination, which could make one not know whether to laugh or cry. As the time for class to begin arrived, more and more people came. When Lin Yu appeared, many immediately revolved around him. His popularity was definitely excellent, and even Li Weiwei, as the daughter of the left minister, could not compare to him. Da. Crisp sound of footsteps rang out. It had an indescribable rhythm to it. It was obvious no one had seen the person yet, but just the footsteps caused one to uncontrollably think that an extremely beautiful woman was coming, for it could be the only explanation why those footsteps had such an amazing rhythm to them. All at once, the noise in the classroom immediately quieted. At the instant these footsteps appeared at the entrance, the whole classroom was already dead silent. They saw an incredibly alluring figure appear at the entrance. Her figure was tall and slender, fine and delicate, and every inch of it was perfect. It was a bit too perfect. For example, her breasts were too big, her waist was too slim, and her hips were too rounded and erect, causing those who saw her feel like they were about to lose control of themselves. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders, and the sunlight spread out through her raven black hair, exuding a hazy kind of beauty. When everyone's eyes turned to her face, they experienced an instant of suffocation. How could there possibly be such an exquisitely beautiful person in this world? Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna were both unprecedented beauties, but they obviously paled in comparison. It was not that they were not as beautiful as her, but rather her bearing and presence would intoxicate one with just a single look. There was a great many people in the immortal realm, and added with the generally long lifespan, there was naturally a shockingly great number of beautiful women. In a small world, a beauty would only appear once every million years, but here, it was possible that you could find a good few in a single city. When the quality of appearance had reached the extreme limit, then who the victor was would be judged by their bearing and status. For example, why was the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire named the greatest beauty in the world, and could cause the emperors of 2 majestic empires to be willing to deliver their whole empire into her hands? Admittedly, it was definitely because she was unbelievably beautiful, but there was also another important reason, and that was her ability. She was an elite that had perfected the heavenly body Tier 1. Such ability and status would fill a man with endless desire to conquer her, and naturally added more credit to her beauty. Of course, rumors were that the Empress was indeed graceful and elegant. Even when the left minister and the others went to inform her of major business matters, they did not dare to look directly at this Empress at all, as they were afraid that they would do something offensive. That would really be seeking their own demise. Ling Han had never seen the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire before, but he had to admit that this beauty at the entrance was indeed extremely captivating, and had even surpassed Zhu Xian'er as well as the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Chapter 902, A Beauty That Is Already Taken. Chapter 902, A Beauty That Is Already Taken. In the classroom, a series of thumping heartbeats was heard, fast like the beats of a drum. Even Ling Han felt slightly dazed and a little out of control, what more the others. This woman walked into the classroom, yet did not find a place to sit down. Instead, she stood on the platform, and opened her mouth to say, "I am Shui Yenyu, and from today on, I am your lecturer." Wah! A round of cheers rose up in the classroom, and everyone was excited. This extremely beautiful woman was actually their teacher. She was already extremely attractive in the first place, but the forbidden identity of her as their teacher would make their hearts flutter even further. Yi, it's actually Shui Yenyu. She entered into the Northern Institution about 20 years ago, right? At the time, she and Zhu Menghuai were collectively called the Twin Pearls of the Empire, and their fame was even greater than that of the present three beauties of the imperial capital. I really can't imagine. Only 20 years passed, and she already advanced into the Mountain River tier. The level of the Shattering Void tier was too low, and no elite would deliberately focus on studying it. Thus, the class commonly would be taken over by a student that had just advanced into the Mountain River tier, as they had experience they could share with their juniors. Of course, the person that could hold the position of a lecturer had to have obtained an extraordinary result in the Shattering Void tier, and would at least have battle prowess worth 19 stars of Shattering Void tier. I heard that senior brother Zhao is currently pursuing senior sister Shui. Which senior brother Zhao? Zhao Lun, senior brother Zhao, of course. Hiss, a top genius from 500 years ago who reached battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier at the age of 26, broke through to the Mountain River tier at 30, advanced into the middle levels at 90, and into the higher levels at 380 years old. Zhao Lun, that senior brother Zhao? Aside from him, who else would qualify to be addressed as senior brother Zhao in the whole Northern Institution? Ari, then we can only admire senior sister Shui from afar, as she will be none of our business. Don't admire her too much, either. I heard that senior brother Zhao is incredibly intimate with senior sister Shui, and would be displeased even if someone just looked too long at her. I advise everyone not to talk to senior sister Shui as much as possible, or else, hey. Everyone sighed in despair. They had so fortunately been assigned a teacher beautiful enough to ensnare and enrapture the senses, yet were unable to court her at all. They had to be careful even when talking to her so as to avoid attracting Zhao Lun's attention, or they would definitely be done for. Zhao Lun had another identity, and that was the only son of the great General Zhao. One of the 7 generals, General Zhao was an elite of the heavenly body tier. He himself was extremely powerful, and his background was also extremely strong as well, so who would dare try to compete with him over a woman? Big sister Shui is so beautiful. Li Weiwei's hands were clasped tightly, and her eyes had practically become stars. Yet Ji Yuna sighed lightly in her heart. She was a bit like Shui Yenyu, as she, too, had no power over her own marriage. Hence, it was nothing good to be beautiful and possess high talent, unless she was monstrous enough to reach the level of the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Only then would she be able to take control of her own destiny. I have cultivated to the battle prowess of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, so I can still give you some guidance, Shui Yenyu said. Her voice was sweet, and hearing her speak would make one feel great enjoyment. First, let's talk about why we should aim for 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. A student raised his head, and said, I know. Though he knew that the beauty was already taken, he still wanted to make a good impression on this exquisite beauty. The higher the battle prowess in the shattering void tier, then the stronger your battle prowess would be in the immortal level. Shui Yenyu nodded, and said, "That's right. The living beings in the immortal level really have too long of a lifespan. For example, once you step into the mountain river tier, you would have a lifespan of 100,000 years. Advancing every minor level would add on another 100,000 years. However, precisely because of that, advancement through the cultivation levels would be increasingly slower and slower, so it would be considered not too bad even if you could only break through once every few millennia. As a result, we would spend 100 years at most in the shattering void tier to aim for the highest battle prowess, yet could benefit in the next 100,000 years or even next 10 million years. Hence, I advise everyone to definitely be patient. Even if you do not rush up to battle prowess of 20 stars, you should at least reach 18 stars. Ling Han nodded internally. However, he was slightly confused as well. Even Wu Gaoyuan, Xiao Miaoyan, and the others had reached battle prowess of 18 stars, so how could Yi Shuang only have battle prowess of 15 stars? In her strongest condition, she was an elite of the Sun-Moon tier. Then, it was obvious that the force behind her had to surpass the 5 sects in power. But, even the 5 sects could nurture an heir with 18 stars of shattering void tier, so why was she so inferior? In a small world, battle prowess reaching 15 stars was indeed extremely amazing, but in the immortal realm, most likely everyone in this classroom had that kind of battle prowess, so it was not uncommon at all. He would ask her when he saw her again. Shui Yenyu paused for a moment, then said, "Now, I will share some insight with you about aiming for the extreme limit of battle prowess." Indeed, she hid nothing, and explained clearly about her experiences on how she had rushed up to 20 stars of shattering void tier, but as everyone listened, they gaped in amazement. They really could not tell just from looking that this extremely alluring beauty would actually work so hard. According to how she had done things, it was very possible that she could have died. Ling Han suddenly opened his mouth, and asked, "Excuse me, Teacher Shui. How can we develop our pure strength to 20 stars of shattering void tier?" The classroom was completely silent before tumultuous laughter broke out. "I'm about to laugh myself to death. What kind of foolish nonsense is that? How could it be possible that strength could reach 20 stars? Ha ha, if one's strength could reach 20 stars of shattering void tier, then how many stars could his battle prowess reach? 25 stars. 30 stars. Don't think nonsense, that is not possible. He's really proving himself to have come from a small world, actually asking such a boorish question." Yet Shui Yenyu waved her hand, and answered solemnly, "According to the research of former sages, after we have cultivated our origin power to the 9th layer of the shattering void tier, we would only have 4 stars worth of space for improvement at most. The physical body is the same, there is similarly only 4 stars left to improve." It was different when a beautiful woman was talking, and everyone immediately silenced. But going by that calculation, the extreme limit of strength would be 17 stars, and there is still a slight gap from 20 stars. Shui Yenyu's eyes swept over the class, and she said, "Let me tell all of you, strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier does indeed exist." "What?" they all exclaimed in shock. This was too inconceivable, and had completely shattered their perceptions. Years ago, Shu Ran, Senior Shu, reached strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier when none before had done so, and none afterward did, either. Shui Yenyu's beautiful eyes were bright, and her gaze revealed powerful admiration. If Shu Ran suddenly appeared, it might be that he would not need more than a few words to win the heart of this beautiful woman. Then how would we make up for these 3 stars of strength? Someone questioned. Shui Yenyu shook her head, then answered, "This is humanly impossible as one would need the aid of the heavens. For example, you could accomplish some amazing feat and obtain the approval of the heavens and earth." A thought flashed in Li Weiwei's mind, and she asked, "Big Sister Shui, if one has come by splitting open the sky of a small world, would they get the aid of the heavens?" Shui Yenyu thought for a moment, then replied, "There has never been a small world that has appeared in the joint peace planet by splitting open the sky, so I am unsure. However, if one can split open the sky, this is indeed an amazing, great feat, so it would not be impossible for him to be rewarded richly by the heavens and earth." Li Weiwei nodded. The Great Ling Empire had come by opening their sky, and this was no secret among the higher-ups of the nation. However, the Great Ling Empire was really too weak, so which great figure would take it to heart? Thus, among the younger generation, she was the only one aware that Ling Han was an emperor that had come by opening the sky. This guy had been capable of opening the sky, so his battle prowess was bound to have reached 20 stars, and with the additional reward from the heavens and earth, how powerful could his present battle prowess be? Li Weiwei's eyes instantly widened. Chapter 903, Discuss a Business Deal. Chapter 903, Discuss a Business Deal. Yet Ling Han thought of something else. In theory, it would be the inhabitants of the immortal realm that could not cultivate to 20 stars of shattering void tier, because the final 3 stars of strength was an unbreachable gap. Only people of a small world, through the bountiful rewards obtained from opening the sky, would be able to gain those additional 3 stars of strength. From a certain aspect, it was fair. You, as an inhabitant of the immortal realm, enjoyed an endless supply of resources from birth, so you would have to make some kind of sacrifice in exchange. Of course, this kind of sacrifice was practically negligible. Just look at how many years the joint peace planet had existed, yet how many small worlds arrived by opening their sky in these many years. However, what qualified Shu Ran to reach strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier, then? He had to have come by splitting open the sky. Why weren't there any legends about him? Even Xiong Chengyun thought that Ling Han was the first person in history to come by splitting open the sky, but there obviously had appeared another one 300,000 years ago. Perhaps some kind of secret was hidden behind this. Shu Ran appeared 300,000 years ago. He stayed in the Scarlet Heaven Academy for only 300 years, and when he reached the peak of perfection of the Mountain River tier, he left the chaotic star's majestic empire, and perhaps even joint peace planet. From then, all information about him was lost. Shui Yenyu said, if you want to attain strength of 20 stars of shattering void tier, you have to do 3 things simultaneously. First, you have to increase your origin power. Second, increase the strength of your physical body. Third, increase the might of your secret techniques. Today, we shall begin from increasing the strength of the physical body, and this is also the easiest place to start. She guided the students in their cultivation. This was really very simple. Just shatter all the bones in the body, then use a secret technique to temper them before restructuring your skeletal structure again. Once could only increase a little bit of the toughness of your physical body, but tempering for 100 times, your body could become as tough as steel. Hearing her say such an understatement, they all felt a muscle in their faces twitch. This was too frightening, right? How many could bear such agony? If they could knock themselves unconscious, and could complete the tempering under a completely ignorant, unaware state, that'd be fine. However, this required you to maintain awareness, and take the initiative to make the sacrifices to activate the process to be able to obtain the desired effects. Everyone understood the logic, but to accomplish it, it was really too difficult. Thankfully, they did not need to aim for strength of 20 stars. It was enough for them to push their battle prowess up to 20 stars. This, in comparison, was much easier, and there was no need to torture themselves so horribly. The day ended, and they all felt a ripple in their hearts due to Shui Yenyu's outstanding beauty and grace, but also felt slight respectful fear towards her, worrying that she would force them to break all the bones in their bodies. This was definitely no joking matter. Thankfully, Shui Yenyu also had to work on her own cultivation. Hence, they only had to go to class once every 5 days. At other times, they would be cultivating on their own. If they had any question, they had to keep it for next class. The teachers in the academy naturally could not compare to masters that were taken through the proper rites. This was not a real master-disciple relationship, but merely passing on of their skill. Ling Han called Li Weiwei out and headed to his place of residence. Ji Yuna followed suit. Hey, you're acting so mysterious. What actually did you want to say? Li Weiwei was an impatient person, and could no longer refrain from asking the moment they entered the courtyard. Ling Han chuckled, and said, I want to treat the both of you to a meal. TSK. Li Weiwei immediately scoffed. Do you think I haven't eaten exotic delicacies? To actually use this kind of method to bribe me? Hold on. She stared at Ling Han, and said, hey. It can't be that you've put some drug in the food, and plan to conspire against us, right? You animal, you actually want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. How dirty. Wei. Ji Yuna called out, her pretty face flushed bright red. Even she was astonished by the rich imagination this girl had. Ling Han drew out food ingredients from the Black Tower, and began cooking. He said, take it or leave it. Do you think I'm begging you to stay here? I will not fall for your reverse psychology trick. That kind of ploy is something I've already done before I was 3. Li Weiwei suddenly took a sniff, and her eyes trained on the 3 pieces of meat on the grill, and then turned to glance at the soup on the side as well. Smells nice, she said, moved. None of your business. Ling Han said, smiling, there's poison inside this meat, so just stay and watch from the sidelines. If you dare to put poison in it, I'll kill you. Li Weiwei could not help but lick her lips, and said, blockhead, where did this meat come from? It smells great. Ling Han tossed her a look, then asked, what is it? Do you want to eat? Damn blockhead. Li Weiwei humphed. You really are petty. I just teased you a bit. Fine, I want to eat, so what about it? If you don't like it, come and bite me. Ling Han was struck speechless. No wonder the left minister had such a headache about this beloved daughter of his. Indeed, she did not have the slightest bit of reserved nature a well-bred young lady should have. He smiled, and said, I still have much of this type of food. So, I want to make a business deal with you. You want to sell them to me? All right, however much you have, I'll take them all, Li Weiwei said with a casual wave of her hand, appearing to be very rich and overbearing. Yet Ling Han looked at her doubtfully, and retorted, how many true origin stones would you have? If you have less than 1,000, then don't tell me you're rich. Li Weiwei opened her mouth to retort, but ultimately sighed in defeat. She really could not produce 1,000 true origin stones. The nobler the clan, the stricter the restrictions would be on the expenditure of their juniors. That was because if you had a lot of wealth in your hands, you could possibly spend your time drinking and making merry. However, the young age was the golden period of cultivation, so how could you waste it foolishly like that? Meanwhile, Ji Yuna's beautiful eyes lit up, and she asked, so what senior brother Ling means is to sell these food ingredients to the various noble and prestigious clans. Ling Han clasped his hands, smiling, and said, junior sister Ji is truly intelligent. He was ranked first in this batch of freshmen, and thus, whether they were older or younger than him, all would have to address him as senior brother. Li Weiwei was displeased, and mumbled, what part of me is stupid? However, this is not spiritual meat. No matter how delicious it is, I do not think anyone would be willing to pay true origin stones for it. Ji Yuna could tell that Ling Han obviously wanted true origin stones. Furthermore, he wanted a large amount. Spiritual meat. What is spiritual meat? Ling Han questioned. Li Weiwei immediately scoffed, and answered, you really are a country bumpkin, you don't even know what spiritual meat is. Let me tell you, only immortal-level demonic beasts could nurture spiritual meat. That is the most essential part of them, and one could devour it directly. It would greatly replenish your energy, and could also improve your cultivation. The effects are even better than the true origin stones. Unfortunately, no matter how big the demonic beast is, the nurturing of spiritual meat is influenced by cultivation level. If the demonic beast is in the minor levels of the mountain river tier, there is only as small a piece as this. She demonstrated the size to be about the size of a thumb. It was really pitifully small. One had to know that immortal-level demonic beasts could reach the terrifying size of a small mountain. Ling Han gave an O. Then, he would have another channel to increase his cultivation. When he saw a piece of barbecued meat was about done, he removed it, and used a small knife to cut it into 2 pieces. Then he placed it on plates, and passed them to Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna, respectively. He said, try out the taste first. See if it's worth paying true origin stones for. Blockhead, you really didn't put any drugs in it. Li Weiwei's face was filled with suspicion. If you're not going to eat it, give it back to me. Ling Han pretended he was about to take back the plate. Go away. Now that you've handed it into my hands, it belongs to me now. There's no way you're taking it back. Li Weiwei hurriedly defended her food. Using chopsticks, she picked up the barbecued meat and bit down. Abruptly, she had swift change of expression. Chapter 904, Descendant of the White Tiger. Chapter 904, Descendant of the White Tiger. Weiwei, what is it? Ji Yuna asked hurriedly. She would naturally not take Li Weiwei's theory of the food being drugged seriously, but she was still worried when she saw Li Weiwei's current expression. This man from a small world might really not know respect and fear and do something shocking. It's too delicious. Li Weiwei suddenly exclaimed. Then she began wolfing down the food, and ate all the remaining barbecued meat. Then she turned to look fixedly at the plate in front of Ji Yuna, her eyes bright as if she was about to pounce over any moment. Ji Yuna could not help but stretch out her arm to guard her food, and asked, "Is it really so delicious?" Li Weiwei turned her face around, and demanded, "Blockhead, quickly serve the remaining barbecued meat." Yet Ling Han smiled, and said, "Will you pay true origin stones for it?" "Yes." Li Weiwei said impatiently, "Quick, hand it over. I want to eat to my heart's content today. Take care you don't become fat." Ling Han said with a grin. "Ha ha ha ha, no matter how much I eat, I won't become fat. I have a natural perfect figure," Li Weiwei declared proudly. Ling Han picked up that completely cooked piece of meat and placed it onto Li Weiwei's plate. The girl was instantly ecstatic, and hurriedly used her chopsticks to pick up her meat, beginning to eat delightfully again. Ji Yuna could not help but feel curious. Was it really that delicious? Li Weiwei was the fourth young miss of the left minister. What exotic delicacies had she not eaten before? Yet now, she was actually so filled with unbearable anticipation. She elegantly picked up her chopsticks, plucked the barbecued meat, and took a light bite with her snow-white teeth. To be honest, the way this meat was barbecued was really not all that impressive, but in a single bite, the strong aromatic taste of meat diffused out instantly in the mouth. That kind of delicious taste would really make even one's spirit quiver. How could it be so delicious? She was more reserved, and also more restrained, but she still felt an urge to open her mouth wide and begin wolfing down the meat. Meow. Right at this moment, a white shadow flashed past, and before the three of them could react, the two pieces of meat on the barbecue grill vanished. That white cat. Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna both exclaimed simultaneously. Wasn't it precisely that famous white cat on the wall of the courtyard they now saw? Its mouth held the two pieces of barbecued meat, and they could actually see the proud look on its face as if it was mocking the three of them. How about it? I still succeeded, didn't I? It devoured the meat ravenously, and in moments, the two pieces of meat were completely eaten. No wonder it was that fat. This time, Ling Han had kept his guard up, but he still did not manage to stop it in time. Don't just look at how this fat cat had such a rounded stomach, its speed was really incredibly fast. Wara, that was my meat. Li Weiwei instantly screamed out horribly, and angrily pointing out with a finger, said, "Damn cat, you dared to steal my meat. This is not over." Ling Han could not help but smile, and said, "That was my meat, all right? I know you're very excited, but you should still distinguish between who's the host and the guest." Li Weiwei humphed, and declared, "You are my man, so your meat naturally is mine as well. Yi, this isn't a cat, it's the divine beast, White Tiger." Small Tower suddenly exclaimed. "Yesterday, I had some suspicions, but could not confirm them. But now, I can definitely confirm that this must be a descendant of the White Tiger." Ling Han gave an ah. This round and fat cat actually wasn't a cat, but a tiger. This had to be a mistaken reincarnation, right? How could it have possibly developed into this kind of creature? He could not help but ask mentally, "Are you sure?" "Ho ho, only a descendant of the White Tiger would exude such a noble air. There's no mistake," Small Tower answered. "Is the White Tiger very strong?" Ling Han asked. He had seen a descendant of the true dragon before, and even the latter could do nothing but be thrashed by his hand. "TSK, what you encountered could still be considered as a descendant of the true dragon. Small Tower scoffed. At most, there was only a sliver of the bloodline of the true dragon in him. However, this white tiger cub is different. Its bloodline is extremely dense, but it seems to have suffered some serious injury, which led to it being unable to completely exhibit the true strength of its bloodline. Hold on, just how strong is the white tiger? Ling Han asked. Do you know about the Genesis tier? Small Tower countered with a question of its own. Was this not a nonsensical question? Ho, if it was the white tiger in prime condition, then a puff of its killing intent would be able to eliminate someone in the Genesis tier, Small Tower answered with disdain. Really? Ling Han did not dare believe it. Genesis tier is the strongest ability of this world. Even if both are on the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, there would still be a world of difference, right? What more when? What more when what? Nothing, just concentrate on your cultivation and don't talk so much nonsense. Ling Han really felt like beating someone up. Wasn't this topic started by this Thunder Tower? He did bother to argue, and asked, then how about the descendant of the white tiger? Do you have the ability to tame it? If I did not, would I speak so much nonsense with you? Small Tower humphed. Fine, it was acting Thunder again. However, this time, Ling Han was not planning to bicker again. He asked, how do we tame it? Wait, it has an owner. With how proud the white tiger is, how could it possibly serve trash the likes of the heavenly body tier? Take out some godly metal. The white tiger has an elemental alignment of metal, and can absorb the strength of godly metal to increase its cultivation, Small Tower said. Ling Han gave an ah. Now, the Black Tower would be able to produce a piece of godly metal every year. If he left it aside without using it, the quality of this piece of godly metal could be endlessly boosted. But, only a single year had passed at present, so he only had that one piece of godly metal in his possession. You cannot catch a wolf without being willing to sacrifice your child. This white tiger is still young. You can establish a good relation with it now, and if you can cure its illness in the future, it would not be difficult for it to acknowledge you as its master. Even if it is, it is still a very strong existence. Small Tower said. Ling Han considered the matter, then took out the godly metal. In any case, he was still some time away from immortal level. Moreover, as long as he had a large amount of true origin stones in hand, wouldn't it be a simple matter to bug godly metal? This is godly metal. Li Weiwei was the princess of the left minister's residence, after all, so she recognized it for what it was with a single look. She could not help but be surprised. Blockhead, where did you get the godly metal from? It can't be you stole it from somewhere, right? Ling Han ignored her, and merely waved the godly metal around in front of that fat cat, and asked, Fat and round cat, do you want this piece of godly metal? The fat cat instantly puffed up in indignation. It was the descendant of the white tiger, so how noble was it? This guy really is a mortal indeed, to not know how amazing I am. It pretended to be aloof. Do you think that just because you're waving around a piece of whatever godly metal, I'll be hooked? You are really looking down on me. Ling Han thought for a moment, then drew out a ball of wool from within the Black Tower, and tossed it onto the ground. Meow, the fat cat instantly could not restrain itself, and pounced over. Directly pouncing onto the ball, it finally realized it was much too unreserved, actually being seduced into revealing its true nature by a ball. It hurriedly crouched down, and using its claws, combed through its whiskers, putting on an act of being aloof. However, its eyes kept uncontrollably gliding towards that ball. It really wanted to pounce on the ball again. Seeing its actions, Li Weiwei broke out into an abrupt bout of hearty laughter. Ji Yuna was more reserved, yet still could not help covering her small mouth with a hand as a smile turned up the corners of her lips. Here's another. Ling Han threw out another ball of wool. Meow. The fat cat, unable to restrain itself, pounced. Chapter 905, Bribed with a Single Meal. Chapter 905, Bribed with a Single Meal. If Small Tower had facial expressions, it would currently definitely be dumbfounded. After a moment of speechlessness, it finally said, This descendant of the white tiger's injury most likely is a brain injury. It really thought of itself as a cat. It was a bit of a retard. Little cat, come over quickly. I also have a ball. Li Weiwei picked up the ball of wool on the ground, and then gave it a toss. The fat cat could not restrain itself and pounced over, but then became so furious it erupted into a loud series of meowing, feeling incredible regret. Why was it that it had completely no resistance against woolen, ball-like objects? Linghan smiled, and said, "Fat cat, let's be friends. In the future, you can eat as much of the barbecued meat here as you like until you're full. How about it? Though you can snatch it, I can still choose not to take it out. Furthermore, I could still choose to eat elsewhere as well." If it had been before it had tasted the delicious food inside the Black Tower, the fat cat would have naturally disdained this offer as something beneath its contempt. "Are you kidding me? Just giving me some food, and you want to be friends with me? In your dreams." But now, it merely had to think about the food inside the Black Tower, and it would already be drooling. It had stood guard here early on today. Wasn't it precisely because it wanted to snatch the food? It could not help but feel troubled. As the white tiger, its pride compelled it to be more strong-willed, and not submit for the sake of mere food, but as a glutton, it could not resist such temptation. "Isn't it just a friendship? I'm not seeking any benefits from you," Ling Han cajoled smilingly. "Meow." The fat cat nodded, and felt that Ling Han's words were very reasonable. In any case, there was no need for it to sacrifice anything in exchange. Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna were both shocked. One had to know that this cat had been described as incomparably frightening by Zhong Daman, and was an existence that could definitely not be trifled with. But now, it actually agreed to befriend Ling Han. They were practically dumbfounded. Most importantly, it was because this white tiger was really too young, and would easily be deceived. Otherwise, it was a cunning guy like Rabbit, just try and see if it would be fooled. Ling Han took out more food, not just barbecued meat, but also other kinds of delicious delicacies. With thousand-year-old spirit herbs as supplementary ingredients, in a small world, this would be considered an incredibly extravagant meal, but in the immortal realm, it was more ordinary. That was because the lifespan of immortals was really too long. Moreover, powerful forces could separate out an area to be used for the cultivation of spirit herbs, and after a few thousand years, they similarly could harvest a considerable amount of thousand-year-old spirit herbs every year. However, in terms of numbers, it could not compare in any way to the production rate of the Black Tower at all. Hence, even Li Weiwei, a daughter of the left minister, could not help but gasp in surprise when she saw how extravagant Ling Han was. Could it be that a small world was so wealthy? Naturally, everyone ate this meat to their heart's content. Though the fat cat belonged to the Tsunda category, that was a natural temperament induced by the pride deserving of a divine beast. But as it feasted, it also relaxed, and lay down lazily on its back, allowing Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna to rub its tummy, completely at ease. It was a majestic descendant of a divine beast, yet was actually bought by a meal. How disgraceful. Ling Han summoned the gold-seeking rat as well, but did not allow Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna realize it. They only thought that he had brought it out from inside his rooms. The moment it saw the rat, the fat cat immediately reacted on instinct. Abruptly, it turned over and got to its paws, intending to do its rightful duty. Meanwhile, the gold-seeking rat was completely frozen as it flopped onto the ground with a paw, pretending to be dead. It was really scared half to death. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "This is my pet, so don't scare it." Only then did the fat cat lick its claws in an aloof manner. Since it had agreed to a friendship, it did have to give Ling Han some face. The gold-seeking rat scrambled onto Ling Han's shoulder with a xiao. One of its tiny claws pointed at the fat cat, and it squeaked loudly, trying to say, "This big guy wants to eat me. Master, you must give me justice." Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna clicked their tongues in wonder. It was not uncommon for a demonic beast to have intelligence. In truth, the majority of demonic beasts that had reached the shattering void tier would even be capable of speech, and those that had advanced into immortal level could even take human form. But, it was really rare to see such a cute baby rat, causing their beautiful eyes to light up as they fought each other over it. This scared the gold-seeking rat so badly it began playing dead again as it thought that these two women wanted to eat it. In the time it took for this meal, Ling Han had established a business alliance with the two women. The two of them would be in charge of opening the channel of sales, and he would be responsible for supply. The profits would be divided 50-50 between them, wherein Ling Han would earn one half, whereas Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna would share equally their half of the profits. Li Weiwei was in high spirits. This was an important opportunity that could change her image. In the eyes of her old father, she was definitely a young mistress that only knew to spend money, but who didn't have their own pride. Li Weiwei wanted to prove that she was not merely a rich young lady that could only depend on the benefits of having a good father. She was filled with fighting spirit, and quickly departed with Ji Yuna, impatient to go out and do something great. Meanwhile, Ling Han strolled to the library of the Northern Institution. Since it was a library, it naturally contained innumerable books, which included cultivation techniques, martial arts techniques, alchemical techniques, formation techniques, and so on. But the academy would not allow you to obtain them for nothing. You would have to work hard to earn academic credits to exchange for these things. Of course, that applied for immortal level students. Secret techniques meant for the Shattering Void tier were completely not in the consideration of the academy, and all students of the academy could peruse these techniques freely. Thus, Ling Han did not have to worry about not having academic credits and not even having the right to enter into the library. Academic credits? I would have to consider obtaining them in future, Ling Han mused. Unless he took some higher up of the academy as master, he would have to think of his own ways to obtain immortal level cultivation techniques. They could be auctioned off at an auction house for true origin stones, but the cultivation techniques that could be obtained from an auction house would definitely be incredibly exorbitantly priced. Even if he opened the channel of sales for the food inside the Black Tower, he could not possibly compete in wealth with the various rich and powerful people in the imperial capital. Or at least, before his alchemy prospered, he could only think of means to earn academic credits and exchange them for cultivation techniques from the library. He did not want to take anyone as master. After ascending to the position of monarch, his personality had also changed, and he now had the pride as befitting of an emperor. In the whole world, who would be capable of becoming master to an emperor? He arrived at the entrance to the library, and saw an old man seated at the door. His whole head was covered with white hair, covering him so fully that even his face could barely be seen. His upper body was continuously swaying to and fro ever so little, and he seemed to be sleeping very deeply. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then walked around him as he headed in. A walking stick stretched out, blocking his path. "Kid, are you planning on stealing a book?" This old man suddenly raised his head. "I would not dare. I merely wanted to borrow books to read," Ling Han explained. The old man cast a meaningful look at Ling Han for a while, then said, "Print your palm on that rock, and you would naturally know how many levels you may enter and what kind of secret techniques you can flip through. Thank you for your guidance, senior." Ling Han nodded, and looked at the stone pillar ahead of him. It was about half the height of a man, and there was a jade stone on top. It was only slightly bigger than the size of a palm. He stretched out a hand and pressed down. He instantly felt a numbing in his consciousness, which immediately returned to normal. If it was not for the fact that his spirit was incomparably sensitive, he could not have possibly felt it at all. Seeing the surprised expression on Ling Han's face, the old man could not help but give a yee, and asked, "You were actually able to sense a bit of your spirit being drawn out?" Ling Han's expression suddenly changed drastically. The spirit was incredibly important, and now, a sliver of his spirit had actually been drawn out. "Don't worry, it will not have any effect on you," the old man said, smiling. Then, waving his hand, he said, "Go in." After seeing Ling Han vanished, he could not help but mumble to himself, "This kid's spirit is actually so sensitive. This has indeed made me feel like cherishing his talent. He would be worth observing for a while." You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.